Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Mary Trump Show, the Ask Me Anything Within Reason. There are 5 days before the 2022 midterm elections. This is our last episode before then. Just as a reminder, we will be doing an election night watch party starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I'll be reminding you of that on Twitter on Monday and Tuesday morning. A lot of people sent in questions. I posted on Twitter, so I got some questions there. So I know people are going to be writing questions into the chat. I will do my best to get to as many as I can. But just so you know, one, I can't get to all of them, first of all. And secondly, sometimes a lot of people ask different versions of the same question, so I kind of consolidate them. So I'll do my best. But we got a lot of great questions tonight, and it is crunch time. So before I start answering your questions, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. We often hear that the Democrats don't fight hard enough, or the Democrats are wimps and it's really the Republicans who know how to get stuff done because they're so tough and they're so unscrupulous. And if only the Democrats could be more like the Republicans. But you know what? A couple of things about that. First of all, it's actually bullshit. For 2 years between 2017 and 2019, the Republican Party had control of 100% of the federal government. And all of the things they complain about that the Democrats aren't doing, they didn't do either. From 2019 through or up until Joe Biden became president, the Republican Party controlled the executive branch, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. So, or the judiciary in general. And still, not only did they get nothing productive done, they oversaw the worst health crisis in this country's history that resulted in the deaths of over 1 million people. They trashed the economy, and they unleashed the big lie that led to the insurrection. From January 2021 on, the Democrats have the executive branch. They have a smaller majority in the House and a razor-thin majority in the Senate, and a 3-6 deficit in the Supreme Court, plus many, many judges that Donald Trump appointed that we're still dealing with, right? Who are still making anti-democratic decisions. And yet, with those very small margins and the fact that the Biden administration had to deal with a COVID pandemic that was still out of control, not simply because it had been allowed to go on unchecked for so long, but because Donald and his sycophants had created vaccine resistance in a significant percentage of the population. President Biden had to fix an economy that was practically in free fall while contending with the increasingly virulent and rabid anti-democratic forces that have been around forever, but have been emboldened like never before since the presidential election of 2016. So, having said all of that, it's still quite extraordinary how much President Biden and the Democrats have accomplished, especially considering the fact that in almost 100% of the cases, zero Republicans, or I should say, if 100% of Republicans are against anything that the Biden administration tries to do. This despite the fact that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are much more often than not Republicans. And also, okay, so let's lay to rest the fact that Republicans are really good at getting stuff done and the Democrats suck at it. It isn't true. So I would like for you to imagine just how much more they could get done if they had real majorities in the Senate. If we had just 2 more senators, we'd get rid of the filibuster, we could codify Roe, we could enact meaningful climate change policy, we could fix the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary. Maybe I can dream, can't I? Maybe we could do something about the Electoral College. We could certainly fix the Voting Rights Act that John Roberts has set out to destroy over the last 12 years. And as for fighting, well, I don't want the Democrats to fight like the Republicans. The reason the Republicans fight like they do, the reason the Republicans lie, cheat, and steal is because they know that in any free and fair election, they lose. I want the Democrats to be better. Doesn't mean I don't want them to fight hard. Doesn't mean sometimes I don't want them to fight dirty. Sometimes I do because the situation requires it. What we're fighting for is so important that if we need to throw an elbow once in a while, I'm okay with that. But we don't need to be like them. So the reason I'm starting here is because it's very difficult to break through the misinformation and the failures of the media and the success of Republicans to frame the argument in a dishonest way. And I think it's worth noting that the things that have not been big issues into this coming into the midterms, and think about why that is. Think about what that means. The fact that the Republican Party is telling a big lie about Joe Biden's victory in 2020, which is incredibly disabling to democracy, that's not on the ballot. The fact that Donald, from the Oval Office, from the White House, planned, incited, and carried out an insurrection against his own government, that's not on the ballot. The fact that Donald stole from that same government thousands of government documents, many of them top secret, highly sensitive, potentially extraordinarily damaging to American national security and to actual human beings who work for the intelligence services in this country. That's not on the ballot. The fact that the Republican Party has devolved into a party of fascists and autocrats who think that political violence is not only okay, but it's justified and necessary. That's not on the ballot. The fact that this Republican Party thinks it's hysterical that the spouse of the person who's second in line to the presidency was seriously injured in a home invasion that was actually an attempted assassination on our Speaker of the House, that's not on the ballot either. Gas prices and inflation, not democracy, not the failures of COVID, not the hundreds of thousands of people who are dead who shouldn't be. So whenever you hear somebody in the news pointing to polls that say that people are voting on the election, people are voting on the economy, people are voting on gas prices, people are voting on inflation, those two issues are more important than democracy, then what the people in the media are telling you is that they have failed miserably at their jobs. They have failed to educate the American people sufficiently so they understand that inflation and high gas prices are one, temporary, and two, not in the control of the president of the United States, and three, they're both global phenomena that are impacting other countries much worse than they're impacting us. And finally, that the only party who seeks to do anything to mitigate the effects of an economic downturn, high inflation, high gas prices, is the Democratic Party. So just want to get that out of the way before I got to your questions. Thank you again for leaving me questions in the comments on Twitter, and thank you for any questions you're putting in the chat box right now. So let's get going, shall we? Okay. Sorry, a lot of these are just comments, and some of them are questions that are not within reason, so I won't be answering them. All right. Will we be okay? I don't know if we will be okay. What I do know is that we're not okay right now. And the extent to which we're going to be okay, if that's even possible, depends on what happens next Tuesday. So it seems weird to put so much stress on one day, but I'm having a similar experience to the experience I had in 2020. It's not quite as intense, I guess, because it isn't a presidential election, and knowing that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are still in their offices does help take the pressure down a little bit. But it's very hard to think beyond election day, right? Because the outcomes are so dissimilar. They're literally like black and white. Like, think about that. And, before the election in November 2020, how could you even speculate about what your life was going to be like? Because on the one hand, Biden wins and hooray, sigh of relief, we can regroup. On the other hand, Donald wins and democracy is over forever. So it's kind of like the same feeling. But what I will say is, regardless, even if we lose on Tuesday, which I continue to hope we will not do, that's not a reason to give up. It's going to make things a lot harder. In 2020, the Democrats did something that is rare in human history. We snatched democracy from the jaws of autocracy. If we lose, that makes it a lot harder to do, because by the time 2024 rolls around, the Republicans will have done everything in their power to consolidate control. Anyway, we don't have to deal with that right now, but I'm just saying, losing on Tuesday is not a reason to give up, but we'll deal with that when the time comes, if the time comes. Oh, which also reminds me, that on Wednesday next week, I don't know what time yet, we're going to have an emergency session, because as late as we go on Tuesday, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get all of the results Tuesday night. So, Wednesday we'll kind of sift through all the results together and figure out how we're going to live our lives going forward. So what responsibility, sorry, this is from somebody called Reduced to Fit. What responsibility does the press bear in the contrasting coverage of their messaging versus hijacked GOP messaging? I think by I'm talking about the Democrats, the press covering Democratic messaging versus GOP messaging. It's, the media continue to be terrible, and it's a huge, huge, huge problem. I've said this many times before. We can ignore polls, as obsessed with the media is with them. We can ignore them. And quite honestly, like, what do you need a poll for anyway? Vote. And it's our responsibility as American citizens to vote. So who cares what the polls say? Still going to vote, because also, as we learned to our shock and sometimes disappointment and sometimes joy. In 2018 and 2020, the polls were terrible. They were wrong, almost across the board. So we shouldn't put any stock in them. But again, even if, I live in New York City, my congressman is going to win. I don't have to vote. I'm still going to vote. That's my right and my responsibility and my privilege as an American citizen. Also, I can't believe I have to say this. My governor, Kathy Hochul, who's a Democrat, should win in a cakewalk, but she's running against this Lee Zeldin, who is a January 6th, pro big lie asshole. And it's close. It's closer than it should be. So, but even if she were 20 points ahead, I would be voting because it matters to me. From Jeannie, have well-known Dems like you, I guess like me, been on campuses mobilizing the youth vote? I haven't been because I haven't been asked. But I really do think that is something we do need to do better. On the one hand, I think Gen Z, and that's like college age kids, I guess like kids 18 to 30-ish. I don't really know how the generations work, but approximately. Like my daughter's Gen Z. On the one hand, there are so many issues that impact them directly that you would think that they would be motivated to vote. There was always climate change, but now, the horrific Dobbs decision that has rendered women in this country second-class citizens, and men who, any man who cares about a woman should also be concerned about that issue. It's affecting decisions kids are making about where to go to grad school. Oh, I guess I can't go to University of Alabama now because if I were to get pregnant in Alabama, I may not get out alive. I mean, it's that bad. So there are lots of issues that should be motivating them. On the other hand, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, COVID, it's 2.5 years. And I guess in some ways it's better, although again, I know more people who've had COVID in the last month than I did at the beginning of things, which is just crazy. And a couple of people who are quite ill, despite having gotten 4 or 5 vaccines. Or vaccinations. So COVID was demoralizing. And I think there are so many things that older generations have done to depress the motivation of Gen Z. We're not doing enough about climate change. We're not doing enough to save their planet. We allowed this fundamental human right to be taken away from them. So now our daughters have fewer rights than we did our entire lives up until now, our entire adult lives up until now. And just the sense that they have that the system is broken. So I really do hope that there are a lot of people who have influence and who can connect to that generation out there on college campuses. And it's certainly something we need to be doing, like starting on day one up until the 2024 presidential election. Let's see. Sorry, I've got a lot of questions that I can't answer. Good try though, guys. Let's see. This is actually kind of funny, even though I don't know the answer. From Andy, who do you think your uncle is voting for in the Florida governor's race? Well, I know for a fact that he's not going to vote for Chris Christie, but I'm sorry, Chris Christie, former governor of New Jersey, who looks absolutely nothing like the Democrat running for governor in Florida. That would be Charlie Crist. He's definitely not voting for Charlie Crist, but I also know he hates Ron DeSantis, so I would not be surprised if Donald didn't vote for anybody. Because, he's a baby. From Oliver, should America adopt the popular vote and discard the electoral college? Yes, absolutely. However, it's not that simple. It would require a constitutional amendment, and it will never happen. So I think we need to figure out ways around that, because I think it requires something like super majorities in the Senate, maybe in the House too, and something like 2/3 of the state. And we are so divided electorally right now that getting 51 states would be hard at this point. So yeah, that would solve everything. It would absolutely solve everything, at least on the federal level, right? It wouldn't help us overcome gerrymandering, which affects local elections, congressional elections. But think about it. How many times have Republicans lost the popular vote? I think it's something like 8 out of the last 9 elections. And yet, in like 2 or 3 of those cases, they still got the presidency, which is just absolutely absurd and terrifying and wrong. It's just unfair, and it's not democratic. So the reason it won't get fixed is because it benefits Republicans, and Republicans love it when the game is rigged in their favor, and there's no way they will ever do anything to change. Oh, love this from Generation X. That's the handle. Don't all lives matter? Fuck you. It's just like the maturity level and the sophistication of the trolls on Twitter has just increased exponentially since the man-child Elon Musk took over. It's really quite something. I mean, guys, just get a little better. I know you can't. It's okay. From Justine, where is the strong closing argument from the Democrats? What would it be? Well, again, it's hard. It's really hard during difficult economic times to make the right argument, because we don't teach people enough about how things work. We don't. The media again are failing us by not explaining why the economy is the way it is right now from a global perspective. And the Biden administration has actually accomplished so much that I think it might be having the same kind of effect, the equal and opposite effect that all the bad stuff Donald flooded the zone with has had, if that makes any sense. Let me put it this way. So, for example, people often wonder, like, why has Donald gotten away with so much criming? He's done so many horrible, horrible things. Why has he gotten away with it? Why does he keep getting away with it? And it's because there's so many horrible things that I think we can't keep them in our consciousness. I just think of the very abbreviated list of things I mentioned at the beginning, of things that should be on the ballot but aren't. So there's that. And it's really difficult for Democrats to make the case when Republicans lie about everything. Every single Republican senator voted against the Inflation Reduction Act, and they all go back to their districts or their states and congressional Republicans. Well, they go back to their districts, they go back to their states, and they take credit for the Inflation Reduction Act, which they voted against. Right? They voted against capping insulin prices at $35 a month. They voted against allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. They voted against everything that would be good for the American people, making it extraordinarily difficult for Democrats to get anything done. And when Democrats finally do, the Republicans who made it so hard for the Democrats to help the American people, take credit for the Democrats' work. What do you do with that? Because the media is not doing the media, they're not keeping score. So it's very frustrating. And again, it's hard sometimes too to make a kind of cohesive argument when you are such a big tent. I mean, really, the Republicans only appeal to straight white Christian people. So, when your party is that homogenous, it's pretty easy to, make a case. It's a little harder when everybody else, including some straight white Christians, are in your party. So, all right. From Carla, Democrats had a solid, if small, lead a few weeks ago. Why are Republicans gaining, especially with candidates as terrible as Walker and Oz? Yes, Carla, it's a very good question, and it is it's not mystifying as much as it's maddening. There are a couple of things about this that are troubling. First, we heard starting a few months ago, maybe let's say 6 months ago, kind of going into the 2022 election cycle, conventional wisdom holds. Off-year midterms, which is the election 2 years after the presidential election, are always bad for the party in power. And that would be the Democrats. We have the executive branch. We barely have the legislative branch, but we're in the majority. So anything bad that happens, people are going to blame Democrats. Okay. So right out of the gate, a red wave is being declared imminent, right? And then the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision. And again, this was preceded by SB 8 in Texas, which not just made abortion illegal in, I think, almost every case, but they instituted a friggin' vigilante system in which, people who narked on women who just wanted to get health care got paid like $10,000 or something obscene. So this is a long time coming, but then the Alito Supreme Court finally just dropped the hammer and said, nope, we're done. Roe v. Wade is history. Fuck precedent. We're going to do whatever we want because we can. We're going to act as if this is a Christian country and only our version of Christianity works or matters, right? Not surprisingly, that was very motivating for any woman who cares about having bodily autonomy, and sadly, not all of them do. But so we saw the polls tightening, and in some cases, we saw the Democrats making ground. And then because of inflation, and high gas prices, which partially are the result of supply chain issues lingering from COVID, which are partially the result of the illegal war against Ukraine started by Vladimir Putin, and the fact that Russia controls a lot of oil, and those are again things that nobody really has any control over, and in other reasons, which I'm not an economist, I don't really understand how this stuff works either. But what I do know is that it's happening everywhere, and much worse in many European countries and elsewhere. But because we're kind of narrow-minded about these things, suddenly the economy is more important than anything else, or rather gas prices and inflation are more important than everything else. Nobody talks about the fact that wages are keeping pace with inflation. So it's just those two numbers are focused on. So the Republicans gain ground. And what's interesting is that, remember, we'd been told for months that of course the Republicans are going to win, and they're going to win big. And when they lost ground, there was this expectation that the Democrats were going to win. But when the Republicans started moving up in the polls again, it wasn't it wasn't framed as, well, yeah, but that's what's supposed to happen in an off year. It's kind of amazing that the Democrats are even that close. It was framed as, wow, the Democrats suck. It's going to be a total disaster for them, even though months ago, most pundits didn't expect them to do anything but lose. So it's very frustrating. So that's part of it. And I think with bad candidates, it's people are just so wedded to their party affiliation. We're so polarized. And like one of the worst things that I'm seeing, especially in Georgia, because Herschel Walker is probably the worst Senate candidate in American history. There's this injection of white fundamentalist evangelicism that is so dangerous. His closing argument is that he has I don't remember the word, been redeemed or something. First of all, he's irredeemable. But secondly, the religious vernacular that's used, the religious arguments that are used are just so dangerous. And they don't care about candidate quality. They only care about getting votes. And I mean, I guess in some ways, Walker's like the worst, just in general. But there are ways in which Oz is worse. Like, first of all, he's not even from he doesn't even live in the state he's running in, which is sort of problematic. And he's just a snake oil salesman and a charlatan. John Fetterman had a stroke, and we might end up with Oz, even though there are two other senators serving in the Senate now who also had strokes. And we know that cognitively, John Fetterman's fine. He just has some processing issues that will get better over time. But again, it's like we have the attention spans of goldfish. It's just like, what's happening right this second, and we don't think about context. It's I think I should stop repeating the phrase. It's very troubling, because it's all troubling. All right. From Juliana. With democracy itself at risk and the continuing buildup to the decisive day of the midterms, how do you keep your hopes up and the anxiety at bay? Well, I'll start with the second part of that first. I don't keep the anxiety at bay. I'm stressed out of my mind. I don't think I didn't get sick because of stress, but it certainly didn't help. How do I keep my hopes up? It kind of seems weird to say this, especially since 2016, but I'm a fundamentally optimistic person. I don't like to give up hope, especially when there's no reason to. I don't care what anybody says today about what's happening on Tuesday. There's always a chance. We don't know. Polls are wrong. Polls say one thing. Early voting numbers say another thing. I have no idea. So I'm not going to. Well, I'm not going to pretend I'm not worried about it, but I'm not thinking about that, at least not on purpose. So the hope is, I hang on to hope because I know that there are more of us than there are of them. I just hope enough of us get the message. So, there's no reason to be cynical. We can be cynical on Wednesday if we have to be, but why give up hope? There's no reason. From Brent, it's the time to build a closing case before the midterms. What accomplishments of the Biden administration do you think make the most powerful shortlist for sharing / persuasion? There was somebody posted a list of the Biden administration's accomplishments on Twitter, and it's vast. I mean, it's just absolutely insane under the circumstances how much and how many big things they've accomplished. So again, the problem is the ways in which things like the economy, inflation, gas prices are blown out of proportion. And by that, I don't at all mean to suggest that they don't matter. Of course they matter. They have a huge impact on people's lives. But you know what also has a huge impact on people's lives? The fact that the party a lot of people want to put back into power won't raise the federal minimum wage. They are against everything that would mitigate the negative effects of high gas prices and inflation on the American people. They're against the Affordable Care. How many times, while Donald was in the Oval Office, did the Republicans try to kill the Affordable Care Act? I think it was like 1 trillion. Okay. So they want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act and have absolutely nothing to replace it with. They are against investing in infrastructure. They are talking openly. I mean, we have sitting Republican senators openly talking about getting rid of Social Security, dismantling it, or raising the age of eligibility to like 70. I mean, the cruelty of these people. And, so it's very difficult to make a case. I'm sort of getting off topic here, but I promise I'll get back. I'll get back to finish answering your question. But it's sort of difficult to make an argument. And I said this earlier, like when the other side's lying, but also when the other side isn't asked to do anything but complain. Republicans, they complain about inflation. They complain about high gas prices. What are their solutions to those problems? They never have to give them to us, which is really good for them because they don't have any. This is the thing. The Republican Party is a party without policies. Well, that's not true. They are for cutting taxes for really, really, really rich people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and what's his name? Mark Zuckerberg. And I think that might be it. I think that's their one policy. They're against everything else. Like all they have is grievance and white supremacy. So the fact that more people don't know that, the fact that we're in a situation in which the voting population would be directly and horribly impacted if Social Security was cut, little and dismantled, probably going to vote for Republicans, or a large majority of them are going to vote for Republicans, and that includes my generation isn't quite there yet, but it's not that far away for a lot of people in Gen X to be needing things like Social Security, Medicaid, which by the way we've paid for with our wages over the course of our lives, has anybody who's ever had a job. So so it's we're always fighting with two hands tied behind our backs. And but I think the closing argument is actually pretty simple. One, admit the economy isn't as good as we would want it to be, but these are temporary dips, and here's what we have in place that is going to help ride us out, and then help us ride this out, and then help us do even better once things are stabilized, right? There's that. And obviously list the programs and what they do. Like hammer on the fact, for example, that if wages are keeping pace with inflation, then that means that inflation isn't actually having that much of a negative impact. Anyway, and the other thing is, again, very simple to say anyway, a vote for Democrats is a vote for the American experiment. It is a vote for democracy. A vote for Republicans is a vote. Well, I don't know that there are a lot of Democrats out there who would say is a vote for fascism, but that's the case. The problem with saying that, though, is that I think we've gone so long in this country without having to pay attention to what it means to be an American citizen. We don't teach civics anymore. That I think a lot of people don't really know what democracy even is. And they can't therefore really picture what it would be like if that's taken away. And I'm really talking to white people because white privilege protects a lot of white people from having to think about these things because we take way too much for granted. So it'll be fascinating to see how we handle it if things don't go the way we hope they will. From David. Shouldn't we be emphasizing how downright un-American Donald and the election deniers are? Seems like all those MAGA yokels think being a good patriotic American is waving a flag and singing the national anthem while being a bigoted democracy-loathing asshole. Yeah, well put. Our country is fundamentally about democracy. Well, yeah, I agree with you, David. The problem is they don't see it that way. And, we're all so siloed. We all like our information sources are so siloed that I think it's incredibly easy for people not to be exposed to any ideas that would challenge their idea of what it means to be patriotic. Because people who watch, generally speaking, people who watch Fox News, if they have a second news source, it's not MSNBC or the New York Times. It's OAN or Newsmax or 4chan. So it's very difficult because we don't even talk to each other anymore. And that's something that has increased so dramatically in the last 5-6 years that it's kind of hard to see how that's going to change. And it won't change if Republicans gain power. But even if Democrats hang on to power and increase their power, and we have a few years, it's going to take a long time because there are a lot of bad actors that need to be removed from the stage. Because let's face it, we'll get Democrats get a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. That's awesome, but we still have the Jim Jordans and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the John Cornyn's. Sorry, that's the Senate. I don't know. They're all so awful. Like, because the only Republicans who did the tiniest bit to protect democracy, like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, they're not going to be in Congress anymore. And in the Senate, we will still have every single Republican senator vote against anything the Democrats want to do, no matter how good it is for the American people, because Republicans don't want the Democrats to have credit for anything. So they would rather burn everything down and to make the Democrats look bad. Right. So I think one thing that Democrats can do is start taking back the symbols, start taking back the language. It's our flag too. We're actually the real patriots. I'm kind of uncomfortable with that stuff, but there's a reason, because it's been so warped over time. But yeah, that's something that we need to start using kind of language proudly. Let's see. From Sharon, why is it that the House hearings didn't seem to make a dent in Republicans' view of 2020? 70% still believe Biden committed fraud. Well, I know it's terrible. I think a lot of that is because if you're watching Fox News, you didn't know what happened in the hearings, because they either weren't shown or what happened during them was spun. Again, that we're so partisan that Republicans aren't going to trust anything that came out of that bipartisan committee, because the Republicans on the committee are traitors in their view, Kinzinger and Cheney. What's more worrisome is why the media let it drop out, because we know that in real time the hearings actually did have a huge impact. But again, it's not on the ballot. I think part of the problem is that nothing. I mean, with the exception of the people who took part in the insurrection, um, the lower level people, none of the architects of the insurrection have been brought to justice, and quite a few of them are still sitting members of Congress. So that's kind of a problem too. From Riley, has the horse race focus of our elections led to candidates focused on chasing numbers instead of showing us their values? Absolutely. It really, I mean, not just candidates focused on chasing numbers, the media focused on chasing numbers. I mean, literally, it's as if the substance doesn't matter anymore. And this is in a slightly different way. This is why the Electoral College is so terrible for America. Republicans don't have to talk to New Yorkers or Californians. Democrats don't have to talk to Alabamans or Utahns. I don't know how you say that. People from Utah. So it just every election cycle, we get more and more polarized. And yeah, by focusing on, who's winning, who's losing versus, hey, Herschel Walker is objectively the least qualified person ever to run for Senate. Shouldn't that matter? Oh, yeah. We keep talking about Donald Trump as the head of the Republican Party, and we keep asking the question, is he going to run or not? Well, shouldn't we be asking why he should be allowed to? Because he spread the big lie. He stole top secret, highly classified documents that have endangered this country's national security. And he incited an armed insurrection against its own government. All of these things are disqualifying. But it's only about, who's winning, who's losing, who's going to run, who's not going to run. Oh, this one's ahead. It's never about why. It's never about what people stand for anymore. And it's incredibly dangerous. From Tristan. Both sides ism on all the major networks is a scourge. Is there any reason to stick with them, or should we all be abandoning them for the voices and creators who have conviction? I don't watch much news, I have to be honest. When I do, I watch MSNBC. And I think that's temporary. I just kind of burned out a little bit. Sometimes I just find it easier to read the news. It's also faster. It's easier to consume more in a short period of time. But if you feel like the news programs in general are objective and presenting things accurately, then I don't know. Listen, everybody, like, people have guests on their show who try to both sides things. And, sometimes an otherwise reliable newspaper will have an egregious op-ed or just frame things poorly. So I think, we don't have to abandon them necessarily. I mean, certainly, like, I won't have anything to do with CNN anymore, because they've definitely made it clear which side they're on. And they're on a side, and they're on the side that's against democracy. And I guess what I would say is that if generally speaking, your source for news is neutral as to the facts, but pro-democracy, then, that's okay. That's good. And yes, they'll make mistakes. Both sidesism is very, very damaging, though, because it does create this false equivalence that, when people aren't as tapped in as they need to be, it creates this very false impression and leads to a lot of people saying, well, Democrats, Republicans, they're all the same. when obviously this is not true. But it's a really, it's one of the weird things about it is like I don't know what the solution is because it's almost like this knee jerk thing. Actually, I do know what the solution is. The solution is to make sure Democrats win in absolutely huge numbers and that the Republicans get totally repudiated. That's my solution. Let's make it happen. Vote. Let's see. From Gretchen. Assuming that we hold the House and Senate, what should be the first policy and legislative priorities of the new government? Two things need to happen immediately. Codifying Roe at the federal level and the Voting Rights Act. Right off the bat. Those are the two things that have to happen right away. From Jennifer. Compromise is always hyped as an ideal, but when democracy itself is threatened, is it time to lean into unapologetic progressivism? I'm thinking it's time to lead, not wheel. And absolutely, Jennifer. I've been saying that for a long time. You cannot make common cause with fascists. When you compromise with the Republican Party, you are giving them power they don't deserve and shouldn't have. It's that simple. Democracy is more important than collegiality. Democracy is more important than the optics of bipartisanship, which, by the way, is total bullshit. So, yeah, they are unabashedly fascists. Let us be unabashed democratic, liberal, progressives, or whatever we want to call ourselves. Pro-democracy people. How about that? From Sean, are you worried about a similar insurrection type action in Republicans? Oh, if Republicans fail to take the House or Senate, how can we protect against that possibility? Yeah, I am very worried about the potential for political violence because they are making it very clear that it's acceptable to them. And not only is it acceptable, it's they support it. We're basically seeing the impact of the violent rhetoric that the right has been engaging in for a very long time. I mean, we see what they did to Hillary Clinton for 35 years. If not for that, even with all of the other things that went wrong in 2016, she likely would have been, I think she won, but she actually would have been president in reality, right? So when the rhetoric becomes less about just kind of like with Hillary Clinton, a lot of it was very misogynistic and sexist. And then over time it became, and it was cruel. And over time though, it became more demonizing. And we've seen that spread, they've done this to Speaker Pelosi also for a very long time. So by demonizing these people, by speaking about them as if they're, just these violent, inhuman people who are out to get all of us, it makes it pretty simple for some people like to cross the line. And I have to be honest with you, and I don't like saying this, but it surprised me that it took so long for somebody to act on it. And I'm, of course, talking about the person who broke into Speaker Pelosi's house and almost murdered her husband. And who, God knows what he would have done to her if she'd been there. And although it's hard to game that out because she has Capitol security, but whatever. I mean, he was there. It was an attempted assassination, and it needs to be seen in those terms. When you talk about somebody, public figures, with a kind of contempt and fear mongering that Republicans speak about, by the way, Nancy Pelosi is their colleague, and they have no scruples about talking about her in the most vile terms. Somebody is eventually going to be pushed in that direction. And the most dangerous and I think unforgivable thing that's happened since January 6th is the fact that Republicans either are completely silent about it, thereby condoning it, or they've embraced it. So why wouldn't they? I mean, we half of Republicans running for office subscribe to the big lie or pretend they do. Right? I mean, these are people who've said, Carrie Lake, this psycho, who's, you know what? That's not fair. She's just a horrible human being. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's not crazy. She's just vile. She's already saying that she's not going to accept the results of the election if she loses. So they're setting it up. And that's why, even if we win on Tuesday, we need to be prepared. This is not going to be neat. It's not going to be cut and dried. It's going to be very messy. The aftermath of this election is going to be very, very messy. So whatever happens, and I'm going to end on this note, whatever happens, we need to be ready to start preparing for the 2024 presidential election let's take a day off, shall we? You know what? Let's take the rest of next week off. We're going to regroup on Wednesday, go over everything. I want you to come watch the Thursday show, of course, but in terms of taking action, let's wait until Monday, November, what is it going to be? 14th. Okay, so we'll get half a week off to either to celebrate or to despair, whatever. But then that next Monday we need to start strategizing, right? If we know that one of their tactics is to have pay people to go to school boards, wave around guns, and act crazy. You know what? We'll have 2 people for every one of those people, and we will just outnumber them. Same thing. If they've got an armed creep standing by a drop box, taking down people's license plate numbers and trying to intimidate them, we're going to have 2 people there to prevent them from having any impact. That's what we need to do. We need to act like we're in the majority, because we are. Okay. So thank you so much for your questions. I absolutely love answering them. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you for just being here and tuning in and helping all of us get through this. The Nerd Avengers and I so appreciate you. So thank you. Quickly, next week, it's Thursday, right? So next Tuesday, we have our watch party. 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, youtube.com/Politicon. No idea how late it's going to go, but we're going to do our best to keep things moving and keep you up to date on the results as they come in. We're going to have as many of the Nerd Adventures there as possible, plus lots of special guests. Wednesday, time still to be decided. We will have an emergency session to sift through the election results, at least those we have. Again, remember, some results may not come in right away because that's sort of the nature of our elections now. Because for reasons which make sense, but are kind of underhanded. A lot of states with early voting count votes that are cast on election day before they count the votes that came in early. It's what gives Republicans their excuse of, we were winning when we went to bed. So why are we losing now? Well, because the early votes were counted later. It's just absurd. Next Thursday, I'm very excited. We have an interview with Joy Reid. That's going to be phenomenal. I'm so happy that she's going to be here right after the election because her take on things is just fascinating. And, she really has her fingers on the pulse. So that's going to be incredible. That is, as usual, at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, youtube.com/Politicon. And when you're at Politicon's YouTube page, please subscribe to Politicon. Does not cost anything. It's just good for more people to join us. Like the episode, leave a comment if you want, and if you click on that, vote. If you click on that bell right there, you will be alerted anytime a new video drops. So that could be an episode, it could be an emergency session, it could be a live stream. I'm absolutely committed to starting up the short videos after the election is over. I'm still a little under the weather, but I'm getting there. So those will happen again. And what else do I need to tell you? Yes, of course, you can listen to the show in podcast form on Apple or wherever you get your podcast, except of course Spotify. And it would be awesome if you could leave a 5-star review, because it definitely helps other people learn about the show. And that's going to be important. Again, no matter what happens on Tuesday, we need to prepare for 2024 like we've never prepared for anything in our lives. But I'm quite hopeful that we're going to be starting from a place of strength, not from a deficit. Okay. So vote, get everybody to vote. If you know people who maybe aren't so internet savvy, help them figure out where their polling place is. And remember, in a lot of places, if not most places, early polling places are different from election day polling places. I know mine is. So, help people find that out. If you have somebody who needs some help getting there, give them a ride if you can. We're in this together. So let's make sure we do everything in our power to keep this a country in which community actually matters. So again, thank you, my friends, for everything. And we'll see you back here on Tuesday, which is midterm night. And in the meantime, have a great weekend. Stay safe and be kind and vote.